Normally, I wouldn't be working in a place like this every day. All I had were complaints. One day, I opened the door to my apartment to find an unfamiliar woman changing her clothes. I thought I was hallucinating due to stress and dissatisfaction. "Sorry, I can see you," I blurted out. To my words, she calmly replied, "My name is Tommy Reynolds. I work for a sports equipment manufacturer. On my 29th birthday this year, I reached the top of the sales department." I continued. "I was featured in an interview in the company newsletter published monthly as the top salesperson among my colleagues. I was considered the most successful. I take pride in myself and have always approached my job with pride. I think it's the result of hard work, not talent. But in this world, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. I wish I could have warned my past self who thought he would be fine. The person who undermined me was my direct superior. I had been mistreated by this boss for a long time. The meeting times were wrong. He intentionally didn't pass on messages from clients. There were too many incidents to count on both hands. I had managed to pull through so far, but this time it became irreversible. That client had promised me a large contract, I explained. On the day of the contract, my boss schemed to steal my deal. He gave me the wrong time. As a result, I was late on the contract date. My boss, who was asked to explain the details to the client's representative again, couldn't answer anything. The client became suspicious, and we lost the big contract. My boss pinned all the blame on me. He reported to the top that it was because I was late. My boss, who is a relative of the company's president, got his way, and all my claims were rejected. My colleagues all looked at me with sympathetic eyes. The verdict for me was a demotion. I received orders to be dispatched to a factory in the countryside near the ocean, a rural town in California. I continued. I was off the fast track and left the headquarters while my boss saw me off with a sneering smile. The factory I was dispatched to was a sewing factory near the sea. I was given the position of office manager. The factory had a factory manager, and there was no such position as office manager in the first place. It was a made-up position for me, a cynical cure. I guess the rumor about me had reached the factory. Everyone was wondering why the top salesman who graced the company newsletter was assigned to their factory. The factory manager is a gentle, kind person who is loved by everyone and is about to retire soon. He never asked me in depth about this personnel change, and so my new life began. I was told that the company housing was fully occupied, I mentioned. I rented an apartment near the factory. It's run down and almost laughable. Surprisingly, though, it's clean, and that was the only saving grace. I don't have the same passion for my job anymore. Of course, my work is nothing more than checking the time cards of the employees working in the factory at a small office every day. It's the same routine with nothing exciting going on. I never thought I'd see the day, but now I go home on time every day. I enjoy a slow walk back to my apartment while gazing at the sea shimmering in the sunset. This walk back home has become my only joy. One day, I heard some noise from my apartment when I returned. I recalled. Of course, I locked it before leaving, and I had the key. The word burglar flashed through my mind. I slowly turned the doorknob. It wasn't locked. Pulling the doorknob towards me, the door swung wide open. What lay before my eyes was a strange woman changing clothes. A half-naked woman was staring at me with a bewildered expression. I stammered. "Sorry, I can see you," slipped out of my mouth. "How embarrassing," the woman said as she continued changing without hesitation. Regaining my senses, I rushed out of the apartment and slammed the door shut. As the door shut with a loud thud, I could hear the woman's hearty laughter from inside. I double-checked the room number multiple times. This was definitely my apartment. I didn't recognize the woman who was laughing inside. Summer is near, I thought to myself. Will she act as though she's somewhat unusual? I kept you waiting. Please come in, A carefree voice from inside the apartment called out to me. "No, this is my apartment," I thought, nervously opening the door. She had a healthy tan and big, expressive eyes, unlike anyone I'd seen around here. "Who are you?" I asked, dumbfounded. "This apartment, it's mine," she replied casually. From her expression, it didn't seem like she had the slightest idea that she might be in the wrong place. I showed her the key I had and explained that this was my apartment. Then, she showed me her key with a dolphin keychain attached. She said this was her friend's apartment, and she had a spare key. Indeed, when we tried it, her key opened the door without a problem. "I'll call my friend and check," she said, and called her friend on her smartphone. After about 3 minutes of talking, she hung up the phone and bowed deeply. "I'm so sorry. It seems like she moved out, and the landlord hasn't changed the locks yet. I apologize for the trouble." "Really?" I said, surprised. Then, I replied to her desperate bow with a bow of my own. After all, I had accidentally gotten a full view of a young woman changing. "Well, let's call it even then." She raised her head with a cheery grin. "Her name was Jennifer Watson," I continued. "She'd come to this town, which felt a lot like San Diego, to help out at a friend's dive shop during the busy season. She'd stayed in this room every year, not realizing her friend had moved. So, Jennifer, are you a diving instructor?" I asked. "Not quite," she replied. Not feeling right to simply shoo her out, I offered her some iced tea I'd made in advance. "Thank you," she said, draining the glass with apparent enjoyment. "I do instruct, but I mostly do free diving. It's a pricey sport, you know," she laughed. As I cluelessly looked puzzled, Jennifer explained further. "Jennifer was a free diving athlete," I added. "More specifically, a constant weight freedive. A sport where you dive deep into the ocean without an oxygen tank. I worked for a sports goods manufacturer, but I didn't know much about such an intense sport. I bet there aren't many competitors in the sport, I inquired. "There aren't as many in the U.S. It's on the rise, but it originated in Europe." Jennifer educated me about this world I knew nothing of. "Past a certain depth, you lose buoyancy and just sink. Being sucked into the pitch-black ocean floor is a feeling beyond description," she said with a chuckle. "The mere thought of sinking to the ocean floor gave me the chills," I admitted. "Why not start with snorkeling? Since you live in this coastal town, you should make the most of the sea." Before I could respond, I heard a car horn from outside the window. Her friend seemed to have arrived to pick her up. "Oh, looks like my ride's here. See you around. I'll come by to invite you for diving," she said before making a swift exit. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning, staring blankly at the closed front door for a while. It was the first time I'd felt excited since moving to this town. Her sudden appearance had brought fresh air into my stagnant life. A few days later, she popped into the factory where I worked. She'd brought lunch for her friend for lunchtime at the factory. "I couldn't afford to make you a lunchbox yet," she said, tossing an absurdly large sandwich to me. "Watch out for the lung bomb," she joked. As I savored the sandwich given to me by Jennifer, the factory manager brought over some iced tea. "You seem to know Jennifer well," he commented. "Well, there's a bit of history there," I replied, prevaricating. Taking a sip of his iced tea, the factory manager announced he had something to discuss. At first, since he took the position, I was immediately tense, worried about something at the factory. But his talk had nothing to do with the factory at all. He asked if I knew Jennifer was a free diving athlete. Who I had peeked at changing, I nodded in agreement. "Great, that speeds things up," he said with a firm nod of his head. He asked if I, an ex-top salesperson, could approach her to offer sponsorship. When it comes to international competitions, the costs add up quickly. Apparently, she had to give up on competitions because she couldn't afford them before. He wanted to support her, but being out of touch with the headquarters, he was unable to help. He thought that if anyone could get headquarters moving, it would be me, who used to be a top salesperson. I was unable to respond to this unexpected request. I knew nothing about free diving, nor who Jennifer really was. I told the factory manager my thoughts honestly. "Well then, let's start with diving," he suggested, pointing at the calendar with a grin. It seemed my days off would be spent by the sea for a while. The factory manager was always quick to act, a characteristic I attribute to competent people. On my next day off following our conversation, I was promptly enrolled in a diving school. With theoretical lessons in the morning followed by practical ones in the afternoon, raised in the city, the deep sea was an unknown world to me. Jennifer was there to gently support me as I cautiously approached it. The first time I dived into the sea, it was, to put it mildly, awesome. While there was a lot to learn, and it wasn't all fun and games yet, looking up at the sea surface from beneath, glistening with sunlight, and being enveloped by the gentle seawater was indescribable. The bubbles I exhaled, climbing to the sea surface, seemed like a scene from a fairy tale. I was captivated by the sea. In just one day, you'll get addicted, Jennifer had told me just before diving. It turned out she was spot on. After finishing the practical diving session and the school finish for the day, I accompanied Jennifer for her free diving practice. She hung a guide rope, relaxing and floating on the surface of the water. A countdown began 2 minutes in advance, and she was to begin her dive within 10 seconds of the official top announcement. Overstepping that would result in a penalty. After a series of deep breaths to fill her lungs with air, she disappeared beneath the water. All that was left for us in the venue was to watch the clock and wait for her to resurface. The tension during this time was beyond imagination. There's a clip attached. At the depth one declares, you must remove it and safely resurface. Apparently, some athletes faint from lack of air, she explained. The fear was magnified after doing a dive, falling into the depths of the sea due to gravity without an oxygen cylinder on your back. A few minutes can feel incredibly long. Eventually, she emerged on the sea surface. As for the procedure, she said, "I'm okay." Just like that, she removed her nose clip and smiled. I'm well versed in land sports, but it was the first time I saw free diving up close, I admitted. I thought the way the team came together in tension to support her was impressive. The concept of doing it for someone else came to mind. I might be able to do it. It was the moment when the switch in my head turned on. After a long time, from that day, I went to the sea on my holidays. Of course, I got a license. I'd accompanied her many times in her practice and built up an image in my mind. I also became friends with the people at the diving shop and guest house. They are all cheerful and love the sea. No one speaks ill of Jennifer. It seemed they were purely cheering for her dream. The expectations waiting on me are also huge. To make her dream come true, my hard work is essential. It has been a long time since I was transferred that I visited the headquarters. There is no marine sports department in my company. I decided to take on the challenge of making a presentation to establish a new department. The headquarters were as lively as before. After a long time, I pulled myself together and attended the internal presentation. The trigger for taking the step was a single phrase from her. There's no marine sports department. Then you should create one. If there's no place, create it yourself. Make the most of your unique strengths and do something that no one else can think of. There are faces of colleagues and bosses who have trapped me at the presentation. I can't fail. A long-lost fighting spirit lit up within me. The presentation was a great success. The president is very interested in launching a new department. He was also interested in nurturing young athletes. In a few days, the CEO and several headquarters staff members will come to watch a mock freediving competition. We've reached the tipping point. The presentation was a success. The bosses are coming to watch the mock competition, not just for Jennifer. Can't other athletes participate as well? I contacted her right away. On the other end of the phone, Everyone was celebrating the success of my presentation. Understood. I'll gather the people. You decide the day. I really appreciate all of your help, I said. I heard her voice sound a little tearful. I'm the one who should be saying thank you. Without her support, I don't think I could have recovered. At the CEO's request, the arrangement for the mock competition was made quickly. On the day of the event, it was sunny, and the sea surface was reflecting the sunlight brilliantly. We hired a chartered bus, and the bosses arrived. They planned to visit the factory in the morning and watch the free diving mock competition in the afternoon. It seemed to be the first time the CEO visited the factory, and the factory managers were busy with hospitality. Surprisingly, the factory manager and the CEO seemed to be old friends. Listening to their conversation filled with old stories, it seemed the factory manager was the top salesperson among their peers. The factory manager also seemed to have quite a past. At a barbecue on the beach, the athletes and local divers mingled. I arranged direct conversations with the CEO about diving, the competition, and the predicaments the athletes face. In the open atmosphere, the lunch meeting proceeded smoothly. That's when a man made a snide remark in a noticeably loud voice. He was picking on a young girl, even though he wasn't drunk. He openly ridiculed the free diving competition as just diving. When I checked the source of the voice, it was my former boss who had undermined me. I wasn't expecting him to be accompanying me on this tour, so my mood sank a bit. In front of the athletes, my former boss kept provoking me by saying that this mundane sport wouldn't work for promotion. Although there were athletes who got angry, Jennifer stepped in and stopped them. It's pretty lame to pretend to know something you don't and then make fun of it, she said, looking straight into my ex-boss's face. Unable to find a retort, he glared at her, his face turning bright red. Even when glared at, she remained calm. She had confidence and conviction. As we started spending more time together, I found myself drawn to her, just like I was drawn to the sea. I haven't told her yet, but if this presentation is successful, I intend to confess my feelings to her. The mock competition in the afternoon was a huge success. Since it was done while explaining the rules of the competition one by one, it was easy to understand, even for those watching free diving for the first time. She patiently answered every question thrown by the CEO and other employees. The CEO and the others seemed to have felt the same excitement and tension I felt when I first watched free diving. They were also fascinated by the charm of the staff involved in this competition. The presentation, including the mock competition, was a huge success. On the spot, the CEO made a contract with their team. He promised to provide full backup. He even expressed a desire to obtain a diving license at a diving school next weekend. So, another man fascinated by the sea was born. I'm going back to the head office to establish a marine sports division. The former boss who had a condescending attitude towards them was demoted by the CEO. It seems he caused various troubles while I was not the headquarters. Honestly, I'm relieved that I no longer have the opportunity to work with him because I don't want him to interfere with this project. Several months have passed since I returned to the headquarters. A poster featuring her is prominently displayed in the lobby. Upon hearing that she is not just a model, but an active player, my colleagues seemed unable to hide their surprise. The relationship between me and her seems to have taken a step forward and a step back. Of course, I told her my feelings like a man. She laughed and said, "I'm okay." But now she is diving the seas around the world. There are few tournaments in Japan. The main battlefield is the seas around the world. It's a dangerous competition, so I get nervous on tournament days. I'm anxious about her safety, but she's different. She's enjoying the seas around the world. I started to feel like it's impossible to tie her down with words like marriage. When will you return to the U.S. next time, Jennifer? I asked. I can hear the sound of the waves behind Jennifer. I'll be back in the U.S. next week. Her voice is a bit patchy, maybe because the signal is weak. No matter how far away she is, she contacts me. My return this time is special. Jennifer says in a somewhat desperate tone. I'm getting nervous at the seriousness of Jennifer's voice. I don't think it's a breakup, but Jennifer, what happened? I timidly asked Jennifer, who was sighing on the other end of the phone. Why are you sighing? What's wrong? Is there anything I can do? I repeated my words, anxious. I was pretending to be okay, even when we're apart, but actually, I'm not. Then you have to take responsibility. After a brief silence, I heard a sulky voice. Why are you making me wait like this? You better step up and propose properly. With that, the call abruptly ended. I stood there dumbfounded, clutching my smartphone. Snapping back to reality, I left work early and rushed to the jewelry store. I was hustling and bustling about, preparing for the proposal. Then, the day of her arrival came. The PR team was also in attendance to cover her return. I guess the proposal would have to wait, I thought when I spotted her coming out of the arrival gate. I waved slightly, and she ran towards me. She had just left her luggage right there. With such momentum, she threw herself onto me, and I was knocked to the floor. I'm back. Now propose. Hold on right here. The exchange between us was all heard by the PR team, and the pictures graced the cover of the company newsletter the following month. Let me propose in a more relaxed setting. It's been 5 years since we got married, but I think I'll never forget the words I shouted that day. It still gets a lot of laughs at parties, and she's still laughing about it today. I hope you enjoyed that. Subscribing to our channel gives us motivation to create more content. We'll see you again in the next video.